Hello, this is Mijueun bringing you updates on retiring through US stocks. Hope you're all having a great weekend. We rarely broadcast on Sundays. But today we have a very special guest who brings us some fascinating news. Please welcome Mr. Autumn Wind to the Mijueun channel. Hello.
Yes, hello.
It feels like we've been greeting each other quite often these days.
Yes, and I'm really happy to see you so frequently.
Some of our viewers might not be familiar with your channel yet. Could you briefly introduce yourself once again?
Hello, everyone. I run a YouTube channel called Autumn Wind World. On my channel, I primarily share information about US stocks, especially focusing on quantum computing. I've invested significantly in IonQ, one of the most beloved stocks among Korean investors, and I collaborate with a community of long-term shareholders. We communicate with the company, visited the US headquarters, and conduct various activities to promote long-term investment.
Until recently, only a small number of investors paid attention to quantum computing or IonQ. Lately, though, it's become a hot topic. Quantum-related stocks have been extremely volatile, skyrocketing in a short time and then experiencing major corrections. Just yesterday, there were two pieces of positive news involving Nvidia and Microsoft, which caused IonQ's stock to jump by 23%, or was it 33%? Could you explain what's going on?
Sure, quantum stocks were quite sluggish until last summer. For instance, IonQ's listing price is around $10, so many consider $10 the baseline. If it falls below that, investors worry a lot. If it's above, they're more comfortable. On August 5th, IonQ was trading in the low $6 range, which shows how challenging that period was. Looking at the quantum sector, it seems Wall Street initiated a buying frenzy. Some well-known analysts in the theme stock arena began saying, quantum is the next big thing after AI, and suddenly recommended buying IonQ. That triggered more interest. And then people started talking about Rigetti, D-Wave, and other companies. Besides, we've seen AI surge over the past year. But as ChatGPT shows, developing these models can be expensive and power hungry. So people started asking, what's the next innovation? That's when quantum computing emerged as a key buzzword. With significantly lower power consumption and immense computational power. Multiple factors converged, and as a result, IonQ stock, which was at $6 in August, soared past $50, a nearly 9 or 10-fold increase. And as you mentioned, Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, often called the leader of AI, attended CES 2025, where he participated in a Q&A session with analysts. When one analyst asked him about quantum, Huang replied that it's still far off. Jensen Huang suggested that 15 years would be too soon, while 30 years might be too long, implying that quantum computing could still be about 20 years away. Following his remarks, the quantum sector saw a sharp decline, losing nearly half its value.
IonQ dropped by about 39%, right?
Yes, exactly. It continued to slide, losing about 40 to 50% from its high. IonQ is a bit like Bitcoin. It's the blue chip of the quantum sector. Its market cap is heavier, so it doesn't move as violently up or down as some smaller players like Rigetti, D-Wave, or Quantum Computing Inc., which can gain several multiples on the way up but then drop 70 to 80%. Some assumed the quantum theme was over, but then Microsoft said it was going quantum ready and told companies to start experimenting. NVIDIA, despite saying quantum was 20 years out, went on to spotlight a quantum computing segment at GTC 2025. There's growing speculation that the AI sector is worried about losing investor capital to quantum. It's not just Jensen Huang who hinted quantum computing might be far off. Mark Zuckerberg at Meta also said he doesn't know much about it, but believes it's still distant. If these big tech CEOs had stayed silent, people might have assumed quantum simply wasn't ready. But their remarks suggest it's advancing faster than expected, enough to make AI leaders cautious. As a quantum bull, I interpret these comments as proof that quantum computing is closing in on AI's territory sooner than many anticipated.
As you mentioned, IonQ stock could have become a 10-bagger in the short term. It jumped 39%, nearly 40%, after a single comment from Jensen Huang, then corrected. Yesterday, it spiked another 33% on news from Nvidia and Microsoft. From an outsider's perspective, these swings might look normal, but for anyone actually holding the stock, it's a challenging ride. You're right in the middle of this storm, so I'm curious how it feels personally, especially as an investor. And since you also run a YouTube channel, I can't imagine the pressure of creating content while managing these fluctuations. Could you share what emotions you're going through in both roles?
As an investor, I initially disagreed with IonQ's valuation and found it overpriced. My average is in the $6 to $7 range, so even after a 40% drop from $50 to $30, I still had a 4 or 5 times profit for me. I've seen worse issues with IonQ, for example, 2 co-founders left in succession. It also dropped about 30% at that time, which caused significant mental strain. Are they leaving because it genuinely isn't going to succeed? I did worry that things were falling apart, but since sales have doubled, the company is clearly doing fine. One concern, though, is how a single comment from Jensen Huang, despite being a major company's CEO, could have the stock overnight. I'm less worried about my account taking a hit than about people jumping in without doing any research, basically gambling. The moment someone with perceived authority says something, they panic sell. That just reminded me again, I can't act that way. As you mentioned, I took a significant hit as an investor, losing millions if the stock drops by 30%. However, I rarely check my account, so it didn't feel as overwhelming in practice. But I'm not sure if I can say this from a creator's perspective, but for me, dealing with issues involves turning them into content and letting people know. In a way, that's how I manage things psychologically.
The number of clicks increases.
The increased clicks and broader recognition aren't all bad. It's hard as an investor, but from a creator's standpoint, an issue can actually grow the channel, so it sort of balances out. In the end, the good and bad add up to zero, and I've learned this phase will pass. That's the feeling I had.
Thank you for sharing so honestly. As a person who isn't a shareholder of IonQ but has watched from a distance, I've noticed that the quantum space used to be all about IonQ, Google, and IBM. Now, many small companies in this sector are popping up. But you remain focused on IonQ only. Why is that?
Well, many of these quantum companies have valuations about 200 times their revenue. They are all receiving similar valuations in the market as well. All of these companies happen to share a similar valuation, but 200 times is hardly normal. If the hype collapses, they could plunge significantly, so we need to figure out which ones might decline less and still perform well. My main criteria are whether they actually have revenue and whether it's growing. In fact, aside from IonQ, the others have shown no revenue growth at all. When they first went public, their revenue stayed almost the same for 2 or 3 years. As you know, unprofitable growth companies need revenue expansion to shrink losses and eventually turn a profit. Once they do, they can mature from a small venture into a mid-sized or even large corporation. I don't see why anyone would invest in a company that can't reach that stage, which is why I'm not putting money into the others. For instance, IonQ's revenue grew 7.5 times, 750% from its IPO quarter through the third quarter of 2024. Meanwhile, competitors like Rigetti or D-Wave have barely changed their revenue since going public. This indicates that many investors aren't doing their homework. They invest without realizing there's no real growth. Many viewers come to my YouTube channel insisting IonQ isn't the leader that Rigetti is. When I ask why they think so, nobody ever responds.
It must be because it has increased a lot.
It's great when the price keeps climbing, but most people see it going higher and decide to hold or even add more money. That's essentially a game of hot potato. Once it collapses, as we saw after Jensen Huang's comment, Rigetti fell 70% from its peak. That's why I recommend avoiding those kinds of stocks altogether.
I think that part is extremely important. As I've mentioned to Mr. Autumn Wind a few times, I'm currently investing with a heavy focus on a metric called momentum. Since I chase stocks with strong momentum, people often ask, if you like momentum so much, why not buy this one? Some people ask me about newly popular stocks. Why not invest in this one? So I usually give them the same response. Momentum matters, but I mainly use it for rebalancing my existing holdings. When deciding which stocks go into my portfolio in the first place, the company's growth story and fundamentals take priority. Without fundamentals, there's no logical explanation for a stock's price movements, which I believe is highly risky. You just mentioned how high the price to sales ratio is. Do you have a target stock price in mind for IonQ, Mr. Autumn Wind?
Actually, I've been discussing a target stock price ever since I started my YouTube channel in earnest 3 years ago. Back then, I set $100 price target for the year 2030. That was based on Boston Consulting's 2030 quantum market projection. If IonQ captured around 10% and I used a price to sales ratio of 10, it came out to $100. But since the current price to sales ratio is around 200, I'm not sure we'll see it drop to 10 by 2030. I personally doubt it, but conservatively I still see it reaching around $100. But recently things have changed and many people are now asking me this. People often say, if it's overheated short term, why not sell now? But IonQ relied mostly on quantum hardware sales until recently, and they've just launched a new line of business. They're now focusing on quantum networking, a system that can't be hacked, essentially upgrading quantum internet technology, and they're making significant progress. In fact, IonQ has been under contract with a U.S. Air Force Research Center for 3 years, with the scope doubling each time. They also acquired a quantum networking specialist called Qubit, significantly expanding this new venture. The CEO expects it could outgrow their existing business, which means the stock's target price must be revised. So, according to McKinsey, how big will the quantum networking market be by 2030? By adding this potential, and assuming IonQ captures another 10%, the price could rise by $40 to $50 on top of $100. So I'm looking at around $140 to $150 by 2030. Of course, predicting 2030 is never easy. People also often ask about 2040. Based on my calculations, IonQ could reach around $600 just from hardware alone, and possibly $700 when factoring in new ventures. So I am currently targeting about $150 for 2030 and $700 for 2040, though it is obviously far off and speculative.
Despite all of that, you've devoted a significant portion of your portfolio to IonQ. What drives that decision, and what mindset do you keep in doing so?
Honestly, when IonQ first started surging, I decided not to disclose my portfolio at all. I told everyone to make their own decisions. But after repeatedly showing my holdings, many people blamed me for not selling and taking losses. So I decided to gradually reduce my IonQ position. I used to hold about 25,000 shares, but I've scaled that back to around 20,000. I've also seeded some promising next generation assets that I'm optimistic about. Even though IonQ has surged considerably in the short term, I wondered if there could be any next generation disruption comparable to quantum. At Consumer Electronics Show 2025, after artificial intelligence, quantum computing took center stage. It is no longer science fiction. It has arrived. The United Nations even declared this year the year of quantum science. And Microsoft launched a quantum program, reaffirming my belief that, despite volatility, this is an unstoppable trend. The strongest proof is how heavily both the United States and China are investing in quantum technology. For example, China has already poured in over 12 trillion won, declaring they intend to surpass the United States. Meanwhile, the United States will commit 6 trillion won this year alone in quantum information science. Those funds are earmarked for quantum information science, specifically to elevate the United States' quantum technology capabilities. After all, how much technical expertise can government agencies themselves really have? That money will likely flow into companies like IonQ, IBM, and Google. That's why I have very high expectations for this year. Also, the Pfizer Chief Executive Officer CEO has again responded to Jensen Huang's remarks. He made a public statement saying he expects great things in 2025 and predicts that by 2030, the company's revenue will reach $1 billion and turn a profit. Because I know him personally, I understand just how significant his statement really is. People unfamiliar with IonQ might ask what's special about predicting $1 billion in profitability by 2030. Anyone can say that, but IonQ rarely even discusses next quarter's forecasts, so this is a big statement for them. They are very conservative and rarely disclose forecasts, so making a statement this detailed indicates they have a real plan. I believe they would not say it if they thought it was unattainable. By 2030, if they reach $1 billion in revenue, about 1,400 billion won, and turn profitable, the stock could easily go to $160 or even $200, which is why I still hold a large position. Holding on confidence potential.
Yes, I understand. Personally, I find quantum computing a bit tough to grasp. I've invited Mr. Autumn Wind to learn more and read various articles, but I still find it extremely difficult. To be honest, I hadn't paid much attention to it until recently. But in today's broadcast, Microsoft addressed companies, remember? They said companies need to prepare for quantum computing by this year and next. It's no longer distant. It's right at our doorstep. Quantum computing is now becoming a reality. Hearing this made me realize for the first time today that I should seriously pay attention to it. I should invite you more often in the future to discuss quantum computing.
I'd be happy to join anytime.
Then this time, you mentioned earlier that you reduced your IonQ holdings and planted some seeds for the future. Are you able to share which stocks you're personally focused on?
Well, after IonQ, my largest holdings are in cryptocurrency-related stocks. So, besides Bitcoin, I hold a lot of cryptocurrency-related stocks like MicroStrategy and Marathon Digital Holdings. I also have many connections with longtime Bitcoin investors and industry influencers. When I interview or meet them privately, I always ask, and for the first time, they all unanimously agree, this is the year that 2025 will mark the peak of the cycle following the halving. Everyone is anticipating this, and Trump's election as a pro-crypto president has only fueled the excitement. Now, all eyes are on what will be said at his inauguration next Monday, driving up expectations and prices. For me, while last year was all about AI, I believe Bitcoin and cryptocurrency could be the most profitable this year. The most conservative approach would be buying Bitcoin directly, but for those looking to add leverage, there are options like MicroStrategy, double leveraged Bitcoin, and double leveraged MicroStrategy, about 4 or 5 choices in total. I've mixed these assets and currently have around 20% of my portfolio allocated to them.
Oh, you bought a lot.
Yes, I've been steadily accumulating since last year, and the returns are already looking good. This year, I expect both quantum computing and cryptocurrency, my second ranked asset, to grow significantly, boosting my overall portfolio.
Does that mean it'll be harder to invite you in the future?
I think it'll take at least 20 years to reach that level.
Even if both take off, please make sure to visit if Mijueun invites you. I've thought this for a while. Mr. Autumn Wind, your resilience is truly impressive. In a way, you're holding a lot of high-risk stocks, yet you seem completely at ease. As an investor, I can't help but think you have a natural talent for it.
They say resilience comes from taking hits, and I've taken plenty. By now, I think I've built some real toughness.
Then it sounds like you've had your fair share of failures as well. Lastly, could you share a piece of investment advice for our Mijueun viewers?
As I mentioned in the interview, I believe you should never invest in assets you don't understand. All of these principles come from my greatest mentor, Warren Buffett. What you don't understand is risky. If you wouldn't hold a stock for 10 years, don't hold it for 10 minutes. I believe in putting that teaching into practice, so I invest accordingly. Of course, my focus on growth and high-risk stocks doesn't fully align with Warren Buffett's approach, but the core principle still guides me. I believe that if you study and invest by properly applying the principles of long-term value investing, you can't truly lose. You might face short-term losses, but like stocks, every setback is a learning opportunity. When you restart, you climb higher, step by step. That's both investing and life. If you follow this approach, I believe you can all become smart and successful investors.
As I mentioned earlier, even though I don't hold quantum stocks, I still check IonQ's price movements from time to time. So when IonQ goes up, I can't help but feel good. Of course, many of my subscribers invest in IonQ, so that plays a part too. I'll keep cheering you on from afar. As an investor, I hope you hit it big in 2025. And as a YouTuber, I hope you continue to showcase the strength and consistency you've built.
Yes, thank you very much for having me again today.
Not at all. You must be tired today, so I hope you get some rest. I'll make sure to invite you again next time.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.